not live yet. Now we are.
Welcome, everybody. We're just going to give everybody a second to log in. Hope everybody's having a great day. For those who don't know me, I'm Rob Slaughter, one of the co-founders and CEO of Defense Unicorns. Super excited to be a part of this live session on LinkedIn and to talk a little bit about Defense Unicorns Big Bang Distro. Andrew, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey guys, I'm super excited to share this with you guys because there's a lot of things with Big Bang as we know, and very excited to share the hard work that Defense Unicorns has put into being able to get us to this point of announcing this. But Andrew, co-founder and engineer of Defense Unicorns. Jed?
Hey everyone, my name is Jed Johnson. I'm one of the platform engineers here at Defense Unicorns. Super excited to be on with you all and introduce the Defense Unicorns Big Bang distro. Turn it over to Victoria.
Last but not least, my name is Victoria. I actually sit over on the growth team at Defense Unicorns. Like everyone said, I'm just going to echo. I'm very excited to be here and have the discussion on Big Bang today. I'm actually going to go ahead and kick us off if we want to pop up our slides real quick. Last time we did this type of event, it was focused on like, what in the world is Defense Unicorns? Like, what do we actually do? Hopefully folks walked away from that event knowing that we do more than post fantastic memes on LinkedIn. I don't know, to be determined, right? But why are we actually here today? As you've seen, like the topic is Big Bang, Defense Unicorns, Big Bang distro. But what this ultimately is, it's tying to the problem that Defense Unicorns is focused on solving, right? Defense Unicorns, our goal as a company is to solve the hardest software challenges for the DoD, for the warfighter, for the mission, for what you'll hear us call and refer to as our mission heroes. So our goal is to solve software delivery for our mission heroes, but like very simply put, delivering software is just too freaking hard. That's it, right? It's too hard. So even though it's too hard, like we still fundamentally believe that our warfighters deserve secure software solutions, right? And they deserve to have mission capabilities. So with that, like as we look to continue supporting our mission heroes, what we often find as part of the conversation is actually Big Bang. We find ourselves discussing the value of Big Bang and what it brings to the table and how it's a viable, incredible solution and part of the puzzle for delivering secure software. But we also understand that part of that conversation is Big Bang is big, it's massive, it's complex, it's hard to navigate and understand. And oftentimes our mission heroes just don't have the resources to actually spend the time to figure this out, right? And so what we are doing today is one, let's talk about Big Bang, like what is it? What is it out there to do? And then two, like how can we simplify and make Big Bang easy, but provide all the goodness of what Big Bang brings to the table. And so with that, I'm actually going to hand it over to the two rock stars that are going to lead this presentation and demo, being Andrew and Jed. So the floor is yours.
Yep, absolutely. So what is Big Bang? Hopefully this is a refresher for some people, but really want to highlight a few things that is the true reality of Big Bang. What it is, what it isn't. It's definitely not as simple as like your DevSecOps platform, right? Like it's an open source cybersecurity stack. The whole thing is open source. It has been around for 4+ years of a lot of different people maintaining it. And that's not even to dig into this massive community of interest in the open source, like industry standard community, right? Like when you look at the projects across Istio, Grafana, Kiali, NewVector, so on and so forth, there's up to or just over 3,000 contributors, 128,000 stars on these various projects. And that's just some like rough napkin math in there. And then as it relates to our industry and defense, what do we know? We know that 85% of program offices have a very similar or an overlapping security baseline. Most of these program offices are starting to use, or talking about using Kubernetes. So if you have Big Bang, that is this vetted, supported by, created by massive community of interest for a core cybersecurity stack that makes it easier to get to accreditation with those control mapping and responses against that framework we all know and love, NIST 853. Why hasn't everyone adopted it just yet? I don't know. Jed might know.
All right. Hey, everyone. Again, my name is Jed Johnson. I'm one of the platform engineers here at Defense Unicorns. So I've been deploying and operating Big Bang in a regulated environment, specifically federal healthcare, for quite a bit now. And I just want to share some of my experiences with deploying Big Bang on like a brand new greenfield project. So I can remember in the early days of this project where my team is tasked to build this secure platform to run federal healthcare applications on AWS. And the organization I was working with wanted to adopt Big Bang to inherit the underlying security controls and to have this platform in a box type of experience that had been a bit like battle tested over in the DoD. So my team and I, we start digging into Big Bang, and it's like, first things first, how do we deploy this thing? And as we quickly found out, there's a myriad of bootstrapping steps and prerequisites to deploying Big Bang in Kubernetes. So if you go look at Big Bang, it's actually like a Helm charts of Flux Helm releases. And this Flux tooling is like the glue that holds all of the Big Bang platform components together. And at the time, I had never heard of Flux before. It's fine, all good. Now we got to go learn about Flux. And long story short, we learned that Flux is freaking complicated, and deploying Big Bang using Flux is fraught with all of these chicken and egg type scenarios, and you end up bringing in these like other Flux components to make things sort of shake out right. All in all, it was very confusing to piece together. And on top of that, there's all these other prerequisites like creating registry credentials to pull images from Iron Bank and set up these like initial namespaces for Flux and Big Bang. And I think it's a reasonably common pattern to encounter all these prereq steps, and then you want to automate it, of course. So you write some very long, like unwieldy shell script to piece it all together. And at least that's what my team did. And so we did successfully deploy Big Bang. We got all the prereqs working, but I think this points to one of the first hurdles or challenges with Big Bang, and that's this initial setup. Like, we spent quite a bit of time just configuring our repo to be able to run Big Bang smoothly. And I remember my tech lead at the time likening our repo to this like Rube Goldberg contraption. And that feels pretty accurate. I think that characterizes it pretty well. So now we have clusters deployed, and we're looking at the pods coming up in the cluster, and we're seeing all these names like Istio, Jaeger, Kiali, Loki. And I remember just being totally flummoxed, like, what the H am I even looking at right now? So we spent several weeks just learning about these tools and these platform components and what the heck they're used for. And as we're learning, we discovered that Big Bang not only has configurations that you can play with, but it also has options for the platform components themselves. So in other words, if you don't like the default logging stack in Big Bang, you can just swap it for something else. So my team spends literally the next like several months combing through these thousands of configurations across multiple layers of Helm charts and Go templating to figure out exactly which, say, logging components our platform needed. And looking back on that now and knowing what I know now, I feel like we spent months making decisions on things that were frankly like kind of trivial. So for example, we just spent way too much time turning the knobs on various logging stacks in Big Bang, when at the end of the day, it's like, oh my God, I just want logging. Then once we made those decisions about which, say, like log database we wanted to use, well, now we got to go configure it. And one of the first things we wanted to configure was getting the logs out of the cluster and into some sort of persistent storage like S3. So now at this point, we're combing through this top level Big Bang umbrella Helm chart and comparing it to the underlying Loki chart in this case, just trying to figure out like, how in the world do we configure this thing? Where do we put these configurations? And I think this experience points to one of the other main challenges with Big Bang, and that's that Big Bang exposes almost every single configuration of its platform components. And when you give engineers these like knobs to turn, we will turn them and we will play with them, even if it's probably unnecessary at times. So after watching this firsthand on my team and having many of my unicorn colleagues, watch this happen repeatedly across multiple teams and projects and mission sets, what we've come to realize is, one, there needs to be a better way to deploy Big Bang. There needs to be an easier way to do this. And number two, while there are situations where you do need full control and access to these configurations, many users just want to deploy a platform that provides a sensible logging, monitoring, and security stack, just like ECS and Beanstalk and Heroku or any myriad of other PaaS offerings have been doing for years. All right, so with all that in mind, and with a good understanding of the fundamental challenges, I'm very excited to introduce you all to the Defense Unicorns Big Bang distro. So fundamentally, the Defense Unicorns Big Bang distro is a hyper-opinionated distribution of Big Bang that also provisions the necessary infrastructure that Big Bang services require. So for example, I talked earlier about how users would want their logs to be stored outside of the cluster in, say, S3. The Defense Unicorns Big Bang distro is going to provision an S3 bucket, secure it with a KMS key, and create the necessary IRSA roles and policies for Loki, our log database, to store its logs in. And I think it's worth taking an extra moment here to emphasize this opinionation piece, because I think this is really the killer feature of what we've built. The Defense Unicorns Big Bang distro has strong opinions on what platform components are deployed and how they're configured. And we believe that the platform components we've selected are the best of what's available in Big Bang, and they've been configured in a manner that's consistent with the best, most resilient Big Bang clusters that we've deployed as a company. And this opinionation, I think it serves two purposes. Number one, it's meant to provide a simpler layer of abstraction on top of Big Bang and even on top of the cloud provider, in this case, AWS. So instead of having users configure the intricacies of every platform component and spending months like turning knobs, with this Defense Unicorns Big Bang distro, we want to expose the absolute minimal set of configurations needed for deployment. Something our CTO, Tom Runyon, has said that stuck with me is, we don't want users to have to touch kubectl. Like if we're having users touch kubectl, we have done something wrong. So the second purpose that opinionation serves is, this opinionation is what is going to make it possible to reuse this software across multiple environments. It's like, we know that there's not enough platform engineering expertise in the world today to deploy and operate Big Bang in every single regulated or constrained environment. So the real goal of this Defense Unicorns Big Bang distro is that it can be reused across multiple environments. And this portability is something that we'll be refining over the next quarter as we deploy the distro across a couple of our different verticals, both on-prem and on AWS. Okay, so at this point, I'll turn it over to Andrew Green for a demo.
The good stuff, the fun stuff. So as Jed was mentioning, the variables that are exposed by Big Bang was built on purpose to help get to the point where this solution can be great for every environment that you're in. And so as we're looking at these things, okay, cool, there's some things that make sense, like what domain am I running in? And then I start looking through this file and I'm looking at the various configuration options that are available to me. And I have to take a breath in the middle of my sentence, and I keep scrolling. I got to scroll a little bit faster to show all the variables and the configuration that is possible if you just take Big Bang from default from a vanilla thing without any opinionation inside of it. And we get to the end. I'm at like 1,800 lines. Sure, there's some comments and documentation in there, but that is part of the opinionation and the configuration that we're talking about. That versus the configuration that comes with the Defense Unicorns Big Bang distro simplifies it greatly. And it also takes into account some things that a Big Bang Helm chart may not take into account completely, like the infrastructure, as Jed had mentioned. So that's like, no kidding. This is the configuration. This is the entire thing for Big Bang. With that being said, the other greatness about this, on my screen now, the bottom half, you have a Kubernetes cluster running in EKS. I just already provisioned that, ran it so that we're going to have to wait and stare at the screen online. And then I have a single command up here. Hopefully my text is big enough, but to regurgitate what that command is, Zarf package deploy OCI artifact with a URL. That's something that Defense Unicorns is building, maintaining, and publishing. And I want to confirm that deployment. So I type that command, I press enter, and we're off to the races. This takes a minute. There's images being pushed into the cluster. Once those images get pushed into the cluster, you'll see the Big Bang deployment happening, just as if an engineer was manually going through these processes to get the cluster actually deployed. Instead of sitting here waiting for all this to be done, I've also deployed another cluster because of how easy this is, where this is already up and running. So I have in the bottom half there, Helm releases for Big Bang, meaning all those tools, those open source opinionated tools that provide the best of breed cybersecurity runtime stack for those common accredited or common environments that we want to be accredited. How did I get there? I initialized Zarf and I ran Zarf package deploy. That's it. That's all of it. That's the magic. So then let's say I'm a real user. I'm an SRE in my environment, and I'm looking at my logs, my dashboard, my Grafana stuff. All this stuff is pre-configured. I, as the deployer of this environment, did 0 things other than log into Grafana. So I could look at this and say, well, what happened in the last 6 hours? I know there was an event that somebody was complaining around 9:20 my time. So I can look at the Istio control plane here and see different variables graphs and data. And it's like, yeah, there's definitely something going on around that 9 o'clock mark. Well, what was happening in some other dashboards and other places? Well, let me check out the Flux logs, because Rob mentioned in the chat that he just wants logs. So here you go, Rob. Let's have some logs. So I can go here, go to that rough timestamp around 9 o'clock, look at the logs and dig into it. Okay, cool, that makes sense. Then I could jump over and look at, say, the Flux control plane. What was happening around that time in my Flux perspective? Same thing, I can see these events. So as an SRE, I have these tools that gives me complete visibility, monitoring, observability into my cluster by default. Not to mention NuVector, one of the opinionation and advantages historically, Big Bang has ran with Twistlock or Prisma Cloud, which is, while it's an open source project somewhat, it also comes with a hefty license cost inside of it. An alternative to that is NuVector, provided by SUSE and originally Rancher Labs. So this is another tool alternative to that. So get the capabilities that Twistlock or Prisma Cloud provided for free, because it's an open source free tool. And again, I can look into this as an SRE. I was wondering if that would happen. It's okay, I got that. So passwords are easy. So I can log in and I can look at the various aspects of my cluster. I can see what platform and Kubernetes version I'm running on. Do I have any vulnerabilities that I need to account for real-time runtime in my cluster? I can look at the different namespaces, see what's deployed into here. I can look at security risks, what vulnerabilities. As I mentioned, there's nothing right now. This is a completely recent, up-to-date, that's embarrassing, up-to-date version of Big Bang, and all these upstream tools integrated together so that you can focus on the problems that are most important to your mission and not worry about the deployment and the configuration of all of these details. And with that, that is a whole demo. Please show us questions and throw it at us in the chat. One that I wanted to explicitly answer that I saw passing by was Alex asked, I'm trying to understand the risk of mitigation involved for open source software, especially involving the DoD. Please clarify if I'm not answering your question here, but that's part of the magic and the beauty of this whole thing, and it's why Defense Unicorn so fundamentally believes in open source itself. The alternative is proprietary black box software. I'm going to pick on my favorite project management tooling suite, Atlassian. How many vulnerabilities does Atlassian have? Literally thousands. How do I address these literal thousands of these vulnerabilities in this proprietary black box software? I can't. I can send an email to my tech. I can say, hey, do you know about this vulnerability? Yeah, it's in our backlog. We'll get to it at some point in the next quarter or 2 or 3 or 4 or 9. But with open source software, I can go look at the code. I can see that vulnerability. I can look at something and say, oh, you need to update this library. If I'm enabled, I could go one step further and say, hey, I noticed that this library that you're using in your software is out of date. Let me submit a pull request and help contribute to the solution for the entire community across the board. So hopefully that answers. Happy to talk about that a little bit more. And with that being done, seriously, throw questions at us. Let us know what else we can answer, how else we can help. Super excited about all this stuff. It is super awesome, super exciting to deploy these things. And I'm going to pick on Jed for 2 seconds here as well. The twist-lock alternative was New Vector, and I can share the link for that in the chat in just a second. But Jed, as I mentioned in the chat, was a new unicorn engineer to us a couple years ago. Prior to that, he served in Air Force for a bit and then in some private ventures outside of it, had been exposed to Kubernetes, but not necessarily Big Bang. And one thing I love about Jed is he's a very critical engineer, right? So he would come into Big Bang and with that critical engineering mindset and be like, guys, this doesn't make sense. This is super painful, as he shared, right? And then a couple weeks ago, I think, or maybe a week ago, he shared a message internally saying like, hey guys, like I just ran a Big Bang upgrade with a single command and it was freaking magical. And that's the type of experience and type of solution that we're putting together to make it easy like that for everybody across the board. Shift all the hard work of this integration, the Big Bang deployments onto Defense Unicorns so that you can be more successful and just deploy your software and mission capabilities into the environment that you want and need when you need it. Another question, so I'm just going to run with this until one of the others jumps in. Nate Parrott asked, do you have a link to the walkthrough? Yes. Lauren Menger, one of our unicorns, put together a blog post on Defense Unicorns Medium that walks through deployment, this entire thing, and we can definitely share the link to that in chat.
And for those following the chat, Courtney just posted the link to the Medium article. So if you guys want to, if the video wasn't good enough, you guys can take your time and follow the blog article. And Lauren did an awesome job. And so always appreciate feedback on that stuff. And, you know, if you guys have any questions, you know, obviously reach out to us. You know, feel free to obviously ask them now while we have time. And then if questions come up later, just circle back to us.
Yeah, so Nate, you're asking about setting up the EKS cluster first. I didn't show that on screen, but I do have, since I have the screen, bear with me. I did have a Zarf package that I created to deploy that EKS cluster. In this case, it's relatively simple. Amazon's done a pretty good job of giving us EKS CTL or EKS control to deploy that cluster. But no kidding, like looking into the details of it, what happens in that cluster is I take a Zarf package that is going to pull in all those dependencies so that I can take them into my disconnected or air-gapped environment and bundle up that binary and just run a few of the EKS commands. So I ran that prior to the demo, but this is all there is here, just taking that EKS control to provision that cluster. And I'm pretty sure my screen wasn't being shared when I said all that stuff. So I described it perfectly. Like, just trust me, guys. It's absolutely accurate.
Yeah, one of the, you know, just to reiterate on some of the big takeaways, because going through the demos, it all happens kind of fast. You know, Defense Unicorns as a company, we've been on this journey with the defense community and the greater, you know, federal government to try to transform how mission-focused organizations deliver software. And it's been a very challenging journey. I'm sure everybody listening is well aware with how difficult it is to deliver secure software to a lot of different environments. It is exhausting. You know, people do it because they care. They do it because they're mission focused. As a company, we want to make it easy. We want to make it easier. We ourselves struggle with all the different customers that we work with. This Defense Unicorns Big Bang distro is the distro that we're starting to use across our customers. Given it just released, we ourselves just, you know, we just released it just a couple days ago. So we're still working through getting it deployed across a number of different customers. But we do believe that the standardization makes it easier. As Andrew pointed out, you're looking at, you know, about 25 lines of configuration versus about 1,800. You know, you don't, especially if you're new and trying to deploy one of these complex environments, it is almost impossible to go through that 1,800 lines of configuration and not only get it right the first time, but not slow yourself down in delivery. And so what this distribution represents is our best practices learned through years of deploying environments. It is open source, Apache 2 license. So if it's valuable to you, please use it. Please give us feedback. If you're a mission customer struggling to get one of these environments up and you want to have a conversation, please reach out to us. Andrew mentioned Zarf a little bit on his talk, and we've had previous LinkedIn Live events to where we spent a lot longer time talking specifically about Zarf. Think about Zarf as the thing that makes it easier to install, and the Big Bang distro, Defense Unicorn's Big Bang distro, being the thing that made it easy to configure, so that way you can actually get to that point to deploy it. So, and Victoria, it wasn't. Did you have other things?
No, honestly, the goal for today is to really demystify Big Bang and show a way to make it more consumable, less intimidating. I know we've worked with a lot of mission heroes where it's just I don't know where to start. And so hopefully today I at least gave people a starting point, or at least hope, but always happy to continue the conversation with anyone that wants to take things offline, ask more questions. With that, I will say, if you have any last questions, send them in live now so we can get to them. If not, I hope people feel free to truly reach out. Happy to continue the conversation.
Yeah, I'll take this next question on, is there a walkthrough for upgrading Big Bang? Oh man, you're opening a can of worms with this one. So the short answer is yes. If you go look at the Defense Unicorn's Big Bang distro GitHub repo, we do have documentation in there for what an upgrade looks like. In short, it's exactly what Andrew did. It's just another Zarf package deploy of whatever the next version of the big Defense Unicorn's Big Bang distro is going to be. Or you can just simply edit one of those 10 configs that Andrew showed and just redeploy the same version. It'll pick up those configs as well. But I want to take a second to contrast that with how I did Big Bang upgrades before. So I've done I don't know, hundreds of Big Bang upgrades at this point. Not necessarily Big Bang versions, which is a whole other can of worms, but just updating, the platform components running on the cluster, right? And before, how this would go is I would log into the cluster manually. I had to have this intimate knowledge of how Flux works. Like I mentioned that a bit earlier, Flux is the glue holding Big Bang together. And I would just go into the cluster and edit these resources live, and then there's this reconciliation loop in Flux where you have to wait 10 minutes for the individual platform components to reconcile. So this means I'm just sitting here watching the screen and waiting for the reconciliation loops to end, and then hopefully the next one kicks off. So I love to bring up this anecdote that Jeff McCoy has of there's this tribal knowledge on every team where when you do one of these upgrades, you have to perform some very specific action to make it go smoothly. It's akin to the janitor who's been working at the school for 20 years and knows how to hit the boiler just right with a wrench to make it work. For me, what the equivalent of that was watching those Flux Helm release and doing this song and dance where I do a Flux suspend, Flux resume command on these 10 or 15 Helm releases, and just hoping that everything works. All of those things I did, that tribal knowledge, is now baked into the Defense Unicorn's Big Bang distro. We're doing all that fancy Flux work for you. And so the upgrades truly should be just a one command thing now.
And one of the issues was, what is the update strategy to align with Big Bang's frequent updates? And so as Big Bang updates, the Defense Unicorn's Big Bang distro will update. And so, there'd be a small lag, and teams figuring out what the right cadence is, whether it's, -1 or up with the latest release. So, give us feedback on what makes sense. But to Jed's point, the big key is that we're trying to test how to do that upgrade so it remains a signal command. So that way we hit the boiler with a wrench in just the right way to make sure the Flux and Kubernetes magic just happens, and all of that's just baked into what's happening behind the scenes. So that way every person trying to deploy Big Bang across hundreds of environments doesn't have to actually go through the same ritual. So
One last thing I want to bring up in kind of discussing Big Bang in general, something that really hit home with me with the Defense Unicorns Big Bang distro was compared to what like people have to do with just Big Bang, like what is the difference? Like how much work and time and expertise is required to navigate and deploy Big Bang on its own versus what you're able to do with Defense Unicorns Big Bang distro. Like that to me was very eye-opening. And so I'm actually hand it over to Andrew and Jed to talk on like why this matters, like what before this even existed, like what did people have to do, the amount of time, the resources, the skill set that required. How does this truly enable folks to focus on delivering mission capabilities versus the nuances and the complexities of Big Bang?
Yeah.
Anyone? Ready, set, go.
Yeah, Andrew, you're probably best for that. I get see another question in there. I'm dying to answer.
Yeah, I see a handful in here that I think they're logistical stuff, but Justin asked how big is the Zarf packages for this deployment. I forget the exact number, and again, don't know if my screen is scared, and that's okay. But give me 2 seconds, and I will find out. Just kidding. I don't have it in this folder.
One of the other questions in there from Jared was Keycloak SSO is a pain. Completely agree. And so we didn't have the opportunity to talk about it on this live event, but one of the things we're doing as a company is working on a project called Pepper, which is going to be used to automate the integration of mission capabilities on top of platform components. And the first area of focus for us is that IDAM/SSO solution. And so I don't know that that'll be the next live event, but sometime hopefully soon we'll have some progress and update of how you can actually take a mission capability and automate the quote integration of that capability to something like SSO and even extend that to something like Big Bang.
And I remembered why I don't have the package locally, because I didn't build it locally. I pulled it down from the repository direct, but if memory serves, each package is just under 3 gigs. Maybe it's like 3 or 4 gigs, but it's ballpark right around there. And there is another question here, similar to what Rob was talking about. This is, step 0 for us in supporting Defense Unicorns Big Bang distro. But our 10-year goal is to deploy anything, anywhere. So that's a big umbrella of a lot of stuff in a lot of places. So we will be continuing to work on the different environments to support that in that manner. But Andrew Andrew asked, great first name, by the way, asked the question of if Big Bang can run on OpenShift or Kubernetes on-prem. And the answer is yes. There's lots of people that I know of in the community at large that have ran and are running Big Bang on-prem with OpenShift specifically. And Defense Unicorns is on the horizon, the roadmap as well, going to be building a distro that will also be natively supported for those on-prem environments, just to make it as easy as possible, just like we did for the AWS environment that I deployed to today.
And as Andrew mentions, there's a difference between the things that Defense Unicorn supports and the things that the greater Big Bang community supports. And so Defense Unicorns has a plan and strategy to do on-prem deployments. We don't know if that's going to be OpenShift or not, but we do know plenty of people that are running on-prem and other deployments using that distro. And so, one of the biggest things I really enjoy about being a part of this community is how active it's been and how much it's grown. To see different companies and organizations that ordinarily would be, competing with each other, working together on common baselines to deliver what's truly matters, which is making the mission better. And so it's been, a privilege and a joy of, myself and I think the entire team to just continue to be part of this community. And so if there's things we can do to help, let us know. And there's plenty of things across the Big Bang community that, aren't necessarily things that we are doing, but are things that other people across the community are supporting.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit about database backups outside the cluster. So like there's a few different things with that. With any like mission application that has like a database, particularly in AWS context, we would hope that that would be stored in like RDS or a similar like out of the cluster database solution. I spoke a lot to like the opinionation of Big Bang. That is one of the strong opinionations that this Defense Unicorns distro has, right? I think there's another side to it where like maybe you have something that stores stateful data like in the cluster, and how do you get that out of the cluster? And we do use an open source tool called Valero to perform those backups. And Valero has like capabilities to perform backups of like the underlying persistent volumes and elastic block stores in the case of AWS to back those up as well. So yeah, something we're actively thinking about and iterating on right now. Disaster recovery is a huge thing. And even when you have like those persistent volumes, like I've experienced with certain platform components, like Loki, where they want to like encrypt the database. And if those persistent volumes ever get like disconnected, you just run into like a world of issues. So I think it starts with this initial design and this like strong opinion and strong preference to just starting with storing data and storing state outside of the cluster.
Well, like we mentioned, obviously feel free to post in questions. Plenty of ways to contact us. So we're on the Kubernetes Slack community at within our Zarf channels. What was demoed here was Defense Unicorns Big Bang distro getting deployed using Zarf. So feel free to connect with us there. Also very active on Twitter. Obviously, if you're here, you probably know we're on LinkedIn because it's a LinkedIn live event. Also on YouTube. And then if you just want to reach out and you're confused on how to do so, feel free to just, email us at hello@defenseunicorns.com. What we plan to do, we've done, this is our second one of these LinkedIn live events. I'd expect us to increase the frequency that we do this because we've gotten a lot of really great feedback. If there's certain topics that you think are more interesting than others, please let us know. I think one of our big takeaways is that a session specifically dedicated to, that SSO integration is probably of interest to the community. You've heard it here probably many, many, many times. Defense Unicorns is an open source company. We don't build any products that we don't release in the open source, with the exception of when we're working with a government customer that desires for that code to be in a sensitive private repo. But all of our core technology is out on the open internet. It's all on GitHub. Most of the stuff that we're working with are open source products as well. So it's, Big Bang, the distro itself that we work with is fully open source, and everything that we've shown you today, building on top of that, is additionally all open source code. And so if you want to check it out, go to GitHub. If you want to have more conversations or there's anything we can do to help you with your deployments, let us know. You don't really work at Defense Unicorns unless you're incredibly passionate about just getting people to better and more focus on the actual mission at hand rather than struggling through IT. A lot of the people here come from a background working across the federal government or the Department of Defense, or their family served, or in some way, shape, or form are passionate about what the government, what the Department of Defense is trying to do. And all of us have been intimately, and crazily frustrated with the experiences we all have had with delivering software and basic IT. And so we as a company have dedicated ourselves to solving that specific issue. This is, as Andrew mentioned, this is, it's not necessarily step 0 per se, but it's a very, very early step compared to where we're going long-term as a company. And we're happy that you all are here to walk with us on this journey. And if there's ever anything we can do to help, please reach out. Bye, guys. Take care. Have a great day.